welcome back. Next up we have little-known housing personality Leslie Channon and Sarita-Marie, who's a tenant for Nottingham City Homes and a member of the NFA board.
That's correct, yeah.
Good afternoon to you both. We're here to talk about Benefit Society and the campaign that has had some significant results recently, but it's been going for a while now, so do you want to sort of give us the background to it and how things have evolved?
Yeah, so it was about 3.5 years ago. There was a bunch of chief execs, tenants. I was one of the tenants, and there was Danny Dorling and then Don Foster. Got around, it was a roundtable event in Oxford, just to talk about stigma and the rise of stigma. Soho Housing was leading on that. Richard and Catherine were really involved. And we were just talking about what could be done with combating stigma. How can you actually change people's minds? And it was just, we came up with a working title of Smashing Silly Stereotypes, just because, and we said that was just a working title. And then what happened is we had put in a bid to work with Media Trust, and we won. We were the chosen charity that year to be able to go and work with ad professionals, because I think there's one thing within the housing industry, we are very good at talking to ourselves, but the stereotype is often found outside of the housing. So how do you actually change people's perceptions if you can't break outside? Yeah. So there was this 3-day event where we had people from Facebook, BBH and other ad agencies that came together, heard our pitch. Yeah. I told my Housing Day story, my importance of being involved with the campaign. Catherine talked, and Rachel from Town and Country talked. And then they went away with the concept and then came back and did a big presentation in front of a live audience. And that's when the Benefit to Society campaign name was branded. They wanted to do a turn of words with Benefit Street. Yeah. Let's turn it on its head and do Benefit Society. And they came up with ideas of a social media campaign targeted at specific people. And we went away, it was great. And the head of Facebook was so impressed that they actually, at that point, made a pledge to donate time and also some cash funds to be able to enhance the campaign. Yeah. So we went away and we did some LSE research. That was published this year. It was launched in the Houses of Parliament, which was really successful. Yeah. And a lot of MPs showed up. We got cross-party political support. And then we also did a launching press that I think it was talked about earlier. Rachel Brodie was talking about that earlier today. And that fair press guide was designed with tenants and how tenants want to be treated. We also now have
and that's the way they're portrayed in the media.
Yes, yeah. It's so, but also challenging when things are, there's always, when social housing is depicted, there's always, a destitute looking kind of grey backdrop with a shopping trolley and a child with no shoes and, rubbish. And most places don't look like that, but it's just that, perpetuating that stereotype. So we were looking at ways to change that. And so the Fair Press Guide was to challenge the media that when we saw negative stereotypes being portrayed, we would challenge that. So we have Inside Housing and also 24 Housing, that if I see something negative, we can call up and say, can you fact check this? Okay. Because sometimes things are lined with truth, so people can almost believe, but the actual sensationalism is fallacy. Yeah. So we've been working with friends of the campaign for a while to work on that in that area. And with the launch of the research to say that 70% of social housing tenants are actually in work or retired, and the rest are carers or disabled. So the kind of feckless stereotype is a fallacy. It's a very small minority. Yeah. And we've had some very, very powerful stories. We made short movies. So there's been a lot of things, a kind of 3-4 pronged approach that's been happening. And the YouGov poll, and there's more qualified people to talk about all the technical kind of back end stuff, but the reach and all of the analytics that we got after that campaign ran was really, really positive, and that it showed that the people we were trying to target were actually clicking on the links and watching the stuff, you know, how people are measured. Yeah. So it was really successful.
So do you think there's been a visible impact? You know, I mean, it's understood, I would think, largely within the housing sector. Yeah. But have we got out of that bubble and taken the message?
Well, further? I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, I think that, so we were at a point in June where we were thinking about, okay, so what now? We've done everything we set out to do. And then we had been talking with the ministry, because I've been working with them with the ministerial roadshows. And actually the ministerial roadshows were really illuminating, actually, because at every single roadshow that I was at, stigma was one of the top 3. Yeah. And that actually surprised me, because I just thought it was maybe hit or miss, but all over the country, people were saying that they were feeling ashamed about living in, and people that had lived in social housing all their lives and had never felt that, in recent years have been made to feel that way. So I mean, I think it was really, really interesting. And then when we were working with the ministry and talking with them, when the social housing green paper came out, there's a whole chapter, absolutely a whole chapter. And we were like, wow, I mean, who could have, and just like reflecting on the last 3 years, who knew when we were sat in that room? And then last week at the NatFed conference, Theresa May talking about stigma, my hands were absolutely burning with the tweets and the stuff with the campaign. So it's beyond our wildest dreams. I think the thing now is that we have gone as far as we had as we think we can go at this point with what we set out. And now we're taking a regroup and like looking at, okay, what next? How can we have it more grassroots on local levels? Yeah. And then also wanting people to feed into the green paper, because I think more ideas need to come in. Like, how do you actually change stereotyping? I think the minister yesterday, when I interviewed him, had some really interesting ideas. I did a recent ministerial event with the social housing green paper, actually. And one of the topics that was chosen on my table that I was facilitating at was stereotyping. And they had to come up with 3 ideas. And it was just really interesting. So I think getting as many tenants to feed into, you know, what would the solutions be? What would that look like? So for the campaign, it's been absolutely brilliant. Yeah. To have it go from sitting at a round table to having it coming out of the Prime Minister's mouth, I think is absolutely, and it's on everyone's lips. Yeah. And it's kind of blown to a national conversation now, which I think is great. Yeah. But it's about, you know, where do we go next? Exactly. So
just to bring Sarita in, I mean, you're aware of the campaign, being involved in it. Do you think it's had an impact on the ground in terms of how people are behaving now towards social housing tenants?
I think within the housing sector, in, you know, in relation to the wider community, probably not so much. We had a consultation with tenants yesterday at Nottingham City Homes. And, you know, there were so many stories of the discrimination these tenants faced and the stigma. So it is still ongoing. So I think we're halfway there, but there's a lot more to be done. Yeah. But it's been an amazing initiative from the start to now. And I'm really proud to be involved in it.
And you've picked up on the See the Person hashtag and campaign, and obviously written a poem around that.
Yes, I felt very passionate about it. And I think what I'd like to say as well is, it's not just, I mean, the media have a massive part to play in, you know, perpetuating these negative perceptions. Yeah. But it's also within the housing sector and housing professionals, the way they look and, you know, perceive tenants. Yeah. And I think that needs to be challenged within housing organisations, whether it's a housing association, an ALMO, it needs to be challenged and it needs to be embedded throughout the organisation.
And how does that sort of come across? Is that the sort of patronising thing, the sort of most the paternalistic type approach, where you know you're basically told what to do and you're encouraged to improve your lives? I mean,
I'm quite lucky. I've got to say, we have got a really good landlord, and we won UK Landlord of the Year last year at Nottingham City Home. So, but speaking with other tenants, when I go to conferences and do networking, you know, they do experience it within their organisations. So it's kind of like, you know, this is our house, you know, you rent the house, it's not your home. Yeah. And that's really bang out of order, to be fair. Yeah. And that's why I'm really passionate, you know, with working with Leslie and all the other tenants that are involved and housing professionals to take this as far as we can.
Absolutely.
You know, but we need the media on board. We really need the media on board.
And do you see that happening? other than 24 housing and inside housing?
Well, I mean, I think things are changing, and because it is a national, I mean, the
I think
fact that
Grenfell has had
Yeah.
an impact, hasn't it?
yeah, I mean, and I think that, I mean, I've been in situations where, you know, the stereotyping of Grenfell residents have come out of people's mouths, and I've actually challenged that. But I mean, for me, my whole journey with Housing Day, and I was asked to write my Housing Day story in 2014 with Aid.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I just don't want to, and I realised I had put shame on myself, and I was ashamed to actually come out and say I'm a social housing tenant. It was never my life plan to be a single parent living in social housing on benefits at that time. It was never a goal, but that was my reality, and I was trying to hide it. I'd be at dinner parties and people would be saying those people, and I'd be absolutely ashamed. But what the Housing Day has done, and by writing my Housing Day story, it has, one, kind of given me a passion and a purpose, but also it has given me the voice to say, you know, if not you, this is to myself, if not you, who? Like, someone has to do it, someone has to stand up. So when I'm faced now in my everyday life, if someone says something, those people, and I'd be like, I'm one of those people. I've had to use a food bank. I've had to, you know, and so I think it's about also social housing tenants taking ownership and not feeling ashamed and actually confronting it when you see it or when you experience it, and saying, you know, you don't have to be hostile, but just actually say, I'm one of those people you're talking about, and I'm not the stereotype. I'm not, you know, on an episode of Shameless. You know, so it is about not feeling ashamed, and people aren't defined by your tenure. I mean, and you shouldn't be defined by your tenure at all. So I mean, I think that there's progress, and I think that this campaign has been really instrumental in starting a conversation.
Yeah.
But we're open for ideas on where, you know, where does it go now?
Where does it go?
Yeah, I mean, who knows?
Do you have a plan for the next 12 months?
I think we're looking at forming a board, and we're having a conversation about that with the steering group right now. We have about 30 organisations that have been sponsors, and we're kind of debating on how that's going to look, and moving forward, and, you know, how does it sustain itself? Because the goal was to get the attention. Now what do we do with it? So we're kind of having a pause, and that's why we've regrouped, and we're kind of rebranding as See the Person. Because it was decided within our group that benefit to society was still too close to Benefit Street.
Right.
And so that is where the rebranding came.
Yeah. So has See the Person had much traction so far?
I think how I'm using it is, I'm still using the Benefit Society at Twitter. That's still the handle. And then I'm using it, so anytime I use that, I'll use See the Person as well. So we're just trying to get people used to that change. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Can I just say, on the other end of the scale of Leslie's story, I've always been proud, I've never been ashamed of being a social housing tenant, but what I am ashamed of is the attitudes towards social housing tenants.
Yes.
So.
I think that's possibly a good way to finish. So thank you very much
Thank
for that. That was excellent.
Bye.